And I'm pleased to be joined now by Ric Peri. Ric is AEA's Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs. Ric, thanks for taking some time to talk with us again this year.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I want to start out because there has been so much talk about sequestration, and there's been so much talk about the difficulty that companies that are probably your members are having getting their products through the certification process. Are you seeing that, or are you concerned, because the sequestration is just now taking effect, is there a concern on your part that this is going to have an effect, an adverse effect on companies getting their products certified?
Absolutely. The challenge we face is multiple. First of all, the furlough days is one more day out of the office, one more day not there, another day of lost continuity in a project. And all of those things are really negatives. Add to that the variability of the furlough day, and now you have even more variability into the certification project. As you say, it's way too early to actually measure the effects. Mm-hmm. There's a real morale problem. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out.
When you look at and talk to folks here at the show, and as you go about your work as a lobbyist, and you talk about the sequestration, what are the folks that are here at the show telling you that the message that they want you to carry back to Washington?
They don't necessarily object to the 3.5% to 4.5% improvement in the budget. I think we all, for the last better part of 10 years now, have had to tighten our budgets. We've all had to find more efficient ways of doing things. And so I think in general, the people I talk to just don't understand why the agency doesn't turn the lights off, or why the agency doesn't turn the heat down 1 degree, or maybe park the excess airplane. Mm-hmm. They don't see why the agency isn't doing what we in the industry have had to do for 10 years. We're not talking about 50% budget cuts. We're not talking about major changes. We're talking about stuff that every business in aviation has had to deal with in the last 10 years. And so they really have a hard time accepting the fact that the agency has chosen to make this about labor resources, human resources, rather than efficiency.
Are you seeing on the part of again, we'll relate this back to the members that you have here with the AEA. I was talking with someone a little while ago and said that they were concerned that there was going to be, again, a ripple effect from not only the sequestration, but the overall tax policy that is being talked about. And of course, we all know that President Obama has not been the greatest friend that business aviation has ever had. But do you feel like that there's some concern that people will be buying fewer airplanes and then there'll be less need for what it is that they put in them?
I think so. I think that the demonization of business aviation that was started back in the last Congress and perpetuated by the White House has a huge effect. And I think that it's a challenge that we continue to face. Why in the world the administration would demonize an American industry? Forget what it is. I don't care if it's airplanes or snowmobiles. Why in the world would an administration demonize an American product? It just doesn't make sense. And I know that it'll cycle through, and I know that it'll rotate back, and the reality is that the airplane is a essential, viable, critical business tool. And I think the two best examples of how truly important a airplane is for the effective conducting of business mm-hmm. is the Secretary of State, who flies a personal 757 for his work throughout the world with his staff, his communications, and his security team. Mm-hmm. And, oh, by the way, the White House, who flies the personal 747 around so that the White House and the President can effectively see his customers in a timely, effective manner. and can in fact see multiple customers in a day, just like we do. And so it seems disingenuous for him to stand at the ramp of his business jet demonizing the businesses that use that exact same tool for their benefit.
You know, I've never heard it put quite that succinctly, but that's really kind of the bottom line of it, is that the folks that are using business airplanes for that purpose are doing exactly what the president is doing. They're going out and they're doing business, they're conducting business in an efficient way. And I think that if you tried to take Air Force One away from President Obama, that there'd be a bit of a howl come up from the White House.
And I don't want to focus on President Obama, because
Right.
I'm disappointed with the White House in demonizing business aviation. But you look at the executive transportation that is managed at Andrews Air Force Base, and you look at the largest holder of business aircraft in this country, the largest holder of fleet of business aircraft, not military airplanes, business airplanes, is the U.S. government. The GSA report on business aircraft that are owned by the federal government dwarfs everything in GA. And it is so ridiculous that they use business jets as a platform to demonize business jets.
That also ripples down through the rest of the general aviation community, where they start talking about user fees to be able for an airplane who would be using any one of the number of products that are on display here to interact with the national airspace, and then to pile a $100 per flight or per leg user fee on top of that, and it starts to really begin to affect a lot of the industry.
Absolutely, and keep in mind, everybody talks about user fees as if we don't pay user fees. Okay? We do. We pay taxes today to use those air routes. So when you talk about user fees, what you're talking about is putting a toll on a roadway that was already paid for by tax dollars. So that's double taxation. And that's what it's about. It's not raising the fuel tax, which everybody I've talked to said, look, if we need more taxes, then add another % to the fuel tax and justify it that way. But don't create an infrastructure, a bureaucracy to manage a new tax, which is what we're talking about with user fees. And it must be identified as what it is. It is a tax. Well, we already pay a tax. In general aviation, the most effective, efficient means of taxing general aviation has been determined for years to be through the purchase of fuel, just like the automotive industry. The automotive industry, depending on the state, pays anywhere from 30 to 50 cents a gallon in both state and federal taxes. I think the federal tax is 18.5% or 18.7% or something like that. Goes to the federal government to pay for the federal roadway system. In aviation, every gallon of gasoline that goes into an airplane is taxed exactly the same way, the same mechanism as the automotive industry. So the idea of throwing a use tax on top of a fuel tax isn't efficient, and goes back to the budget, goes back to sequestration, and it's about the efficiency of government. Are we going to create another bureaucracy that arguably takes 50 cents on the dollar to operate and create a new tax base? Or are we going to use the efficient system we have today and simply add another % to the tax.
You said a few moments ago that the Part 145 rewrite was not really on your radar screen, so let me just ask you, what is on your radar screen right now from a legislative and policy aspect of things?
We've had a couple of good successes. For the operating community, we did have a rulemaking come out early this year on the nav database updates into our airplanes. FAA kind of did a bit of an unusual rulemaking, and you have to read it very carefully, but what they fundamentally did was they made the nav database updates, removed it from a preventive maintenance action, and simply made it a pilot action. And I equate that to, we never considered it to be a maintenance action to replace the paper charts in the airplane because they expired. So why would changing an electronic database, electronic chart, be considered a maintenance action? So they've taken it away. Really should help the operator a lot because it's reduced the paperwork requirements, the record keeping requirements, and those items. It also clarified it that it's about the nav database, not about operating systems and not about special equipment, and if it takes tools, it's not pilot action, and those still have to go to the shop, and so those are really important steps they're making. We have two significant activities going on in the rulemaking committee arena. The Part 23 Aviation Rulemaking Committee has been reviewing that process, and the recommendation is going to the FAA later this year. That recommendation is for the FAA to retain the safety standard, the performance safety standard,
right?
But the prescriptive method of compliance should be transferred into the public domain.
Okay.
So that organizations such as ASTM International or SAE or RTCA or ISO or any of these standards bodies will have the ability to develop the performance or the methods of compliance to the regulations. It sounds kind of bureaucratic, but it's a very important step because the government cannot effectively maintain standards for technologies that change rapidly.
Right.
And that's a proven, it's not an aviation thing, this is proven across all boundaries. And so when you have very prescriptive methods of compliance, you end up with airplanes that have cockpits that resemble a '67 Chevy instead of a 2010, modern car. And if you think about a 40-year-old car,
right?
Okay, no seat belts, and if you did have seat belts, it was special order. Certainly no airbags. Not even a padded dash. Okay.
An AM radio.
An AM radio. No dynamic braking. Drum brakes. Okay.
Right.
Would you put your child in that car? And yet, that is the cockpit that the standards require today. And so if you want to build a modern airplane with a cockpit that resembles the latest DOT standards for cars. Oh, by the way, DOT standards, same agency that the FAA works for, okay? You have to have special condition. So this whole revision on Part 23 is really about bringing the government standards for what an airplane should look like, not perform like, but look like, to at least current automotive standards.
Seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it?
It seems like a no-brainer. We're looking forward to it. We should have a rulemaking probably late this year or early next year. So we're really looking, we're excited about that one. The ultimate goal is to be able to make the aircraft twice as safe at half the price. And that's a great goal, and I think the proposal that's going forward is going to get close to that. So we're real excited about that.
And I know AEA will be on the forefront of trying to do everything they can to make sure that happens.
Absolutely.
Rick, unfortunately, we are out of time, but it's been great talking with you, and hope you're having a great show here, and it looks like you've got great attendance, and folks are going to the booths, and I've talked to some folks that said they were writing purchase orders, and commerce is moving, and that's what it's all about.
It is a great group, and we love what we do, and it always makes going to work that much easier.
Ric Peri, who is the Vice President for Government Affairs with the Aircraft Electronics Association, we really appreciate your time today.
Aero-TV's live coverage of the 56th Annual AEA International Convention and Trade Show is brought to you in part by the following sponsors.